故宫南 先不要直播。
Welcome to the environmental seminar. Today is our pleasure to invite Professor Tzu-Hao. Tzu-Hao is currently a research scientist, assistant research scientist in the Biodiversity Research Center in Academia Sinica. He's very fresh trained. He just came back to Taiwan last year. I would like Tzu-Hao to introduce himself. So today he will be talking about ocean diversity using the listening to study the ocean diversity.
Okay, thank you everyone. I'm very honored to be here and presenting my recent progress to you. So my name is, you can just call me Harry. So like Dr. Share's introduction, last year I just came back to Academia Sinica from Japan. Yeah, so right now I'm in charge of the marine ecoacoustic and the informatics lab. So I graduated in Institute of Ecology and Evolutionary Biology in 2013, and then I work on several postdocs, so I have pretty long postdoc records. Yeah, but I also obtained several independent postdoc records. So if you are still studying PhD and wondering that how you may want to survive or work on your own research, then you can also feel free to talk to me. I can show you that how I obtained some independent funding for postdoc. Yeah. So let's see. Back to Academia Sinica. Okay, so today I would like to introduce you our Ocean Biodiversity Listening Project. So in this talk, I will introduce at first why we study ocean sound, because right now ocean sound has been considered as an essential ocean variable. And then I will introduce techniques of soundscape information retrieval that we're trying to develop some AI techniques to processing a large amount of acoustic data. And I will show you how we use soundscape information to monitoring ecosystem dynamics. And then finally, I will talk about some opportunities extended from our project, and then how we move toward the open science of ecoacoustic. Okay, so at first, I think many of you guys working on the marine field or the environmental field. So sometimes if we want to study the intertidal zone or in the deep sea, these are very challenging marine environment. For example, for the intertidal zone, the wave is so high, so if you want to do the submersible observations, sometimes it's pretty risky, right? So recently, many people are discussing about Datan algal reef, that kind of environment is pretty wavy. So it's not very easy to observe the biodiversity. I mentioned the deep sea. I have been staying in Jen State for 2 years. So in Jen State, somehow they are really interested in the deep sea. Right? The deep sea they are mentioned is deeper than 3,000 meters. From our observation, it's mostly below 500 meters is deep sea, right? But they think that between 500 meters and 3,000 meters is pretty shallow for them. Yeah. So every time I discuss with them, they are always focusing on what are we discussing right now? It's below 3,000 meters or higher than 3,000 meters. Yeah. But even though Jen State have 7 research vessels, right? It just have 7 research vessels, including a submersible. But still, the ships we can allocate is still pretty limited. Yeah. So it's not very easy for us to observe biodiversity in deep sea. Deep sea is the most biggest habitat in our ocean. Right? So how can we do efficient observation of biodiversity? Yeah. So maybe we need to apply some remote sensing techniques. But for this kind of remote sensing technique, most of them are based on the visual information, such as satellite images or airborne LiDAR sensors. But they can only provide us very short range applications. Even though we deploy our ROVs in the deep sea, but the range we can see is still very limited. And then right now, lots of people are discussing about the potential of environmental DNA or RNA, right? But they are still suffering from the quantification issues. For example, if you collect this kind of environmental DNA or RNA, whether this is really from this region or from the other region, but followed by the current. Yeah, so there are still lots of issues. So today what I'm trying to introduce is that maybe we can use passive acoustic to listen to all kinds of marine animals. For example, in coral reef, like shrimps or like a fish, they do produce lots of noise. And then even in the sea, like hydrothermal vents can also produce sounds so that you can know the activity, the vent activity. And then we can also hear the anthropogenic noise so that we will know, okay, lots of development here or like lots of scientific exploration here. Okay, so at first I would like to, I don't know whether we can play sound or not. Okay, so that, let me try.可是好像没有声音，我现在这边没有办法秀出来。可能线上有，但是现场好像没有。好，等一下我放一下。好，这样就大家都看到了。有声音，可是很小声。有，但是很小声。有了。OK, cool. Yeah. Okay, so at first I would like to introduce you some like animal vocalization underwater. And okay, you already see a result, but let us listen something. So the first is this. Let's hear it again. So this is the sound of standing shrimps. So they use their claw to produce this kind of high energy like acoustic signals so that they can use for defend their territory or like attack their prey. So this is a very classical animal sound in the coral reef environment. And the next audio is also from coral reef environment. You can hear the low frequency rumble, right? Like this. Let's hear it. So this is the denser fish, sound of denser fish. Yeah, they are pretty common in coral reef, especially in shallow water coral reef. So if you have a chance to do not scuba diving, like snorkeling there, probably you will have a chance to hear this. But if you are doing like scuba diving, then your breather is too noisy, so that you may not be able to catch these signals. Yeah, and then the third one is also from fish, but not from coral reefs. This is not from duck. This is from fish. But what kind of fish? Yeah. So this is croakers. 石手鱼或大黄鱼. Yeah. So they are very common in estuary environment or like in shallow water, like muddy environment. And especially they are very interesting that they will make chorus like after the sunset. Yeah. So they will make this kind of nighttime chorus. And I always joking that this is just like a Taiwanese night market culture, right? Yeah, after sunset, so everyone go to night market and enjoy. So the croakers also do the same behavior. Yeah. Okay, the fourth one is pretty weird, but this is some animals we do not see, we cannot see in Taiwan, but mostly in Arctic region. This is produced from animals, right? One kind of marine mammal. So this is sound like seals or sea elephants, yeah, like their vocalizations. So they use this kind of signals to like navigation or like communicate with conspecifics, yeah, like coordinate their group behavior. Yeah. So this is what you can hear in an Arctic region. And usually it will produce this kind of call for more than 1 or 2 minutes. Yeah, so I have to cut it down because it's really too long. Okay. And then the next one, maybe it will sound more familiar to you. Okay, so this is like a dolphins, right? Like a Chinese white dolphin. So this is the subject I work on for my PhD. Yeah, like the reason I choose to study this is because, yeah, at that time we have a lot of resources to study humpback dolphins, right? But the problem is that when I take onboard surveys, I need to spend 7 or 8 hours only just to spot like 1 or 2 dolphins. So in that kind of condition, like even though you survey for more than 80 days in 1 year, you still have like 60 or 80 sightings. But it's not, going to help you to finish your dissertation, right? So I decided to listen underwater and then use the underwater vocalizations to study the habitat use pattern. Okay, the next one. So many of you probably know that, right? This is from the sounds of humpback whales. Yeah, not humpback dolphins, so humpback whales. Yeah, so and my friend in Hawaii, they say that, okay, in the winter time, it's pretty noisy, mostly because of humpback whales. Yeah, because there are so many humpback whales in Hawaiian waters, and then you can just hear their songs all the time. Of course, there are lots of underwater vocalizations produced from marine animals, right? But we can also hear lots of sounds, signals produced from environmental events or anthropogenic activities, like this one. Yeah, so this sounds like some kind of a Star Wars event, but this is like a sounder event recorded by underwater recorder at very shallow water depths. Yeah, so we can use this kind of environmental sounds to detect what kind of environmental event, like rainfall or wavy environment or like thunder, and to estimate the surface condition. This is the air gun surface. Okay, so they use this kind of air gun to scan for oil in the deep sea, right? So they will usually conduct this kind of survey for more than 1 month. And recently there are many articles mention that this kind of air gun signals may kill lots of crustaceans or copepods. Yeah, so they may produce pretty big impact for marine biodiversity. Yeah, and also ROV have noise. Like this one. Okay, so we know that many marine animals, they rely on sound to navigate, foraging, or select habitats, or even detect their predators. But right now, there's one big issue is that we are emitting lots of noise underwater. So this may produce lots of impacts. So you may wonder that, okay, what is the potential impact range if we produce underwater noise? There's one famous experiment called Heard Island Project that US scientists, they are producing underwater sound in the Southern Ocean. And then they found that this kind of signal can be detected even in Boston or in San Diego. So that means if you produce this kind of high amplitude but low frequency signals, and then the propagation range can be very long, even though you design some kind of MPA, marine protected area, right? But the noise will still overpass this kind of boundary and affect the biodiversity there. So not even right now, because of the global increase of the cargo or maritime traffic, so the low frequency noise also increased 3 dB per decade, and the 3 dB is actually double in terms of energy, right? So you can consider that right now the marine animals may not be able to adapt their behavior, right, in response to this kind of global increase of underwater noise. So noise do produce lots of ecological impact. For example, if you are very close to the noise source, then your hearing may be damaged, or you may avoid this kind of noise source because you just don't feel uncomfortable, right? And also a little bit, if you stay a little bit away from the noise source, then your acoustic signals or your communication may be interfered by noise. Right? And then finally, if you are just hear these signals, but without this kind of previous mention interference, but your body may still feel the stress, and that may cause the long-term stress for your physiological conditions. Yeah. And then noise not only produce impact for sound-producing animals, they may also affect the ecosystem resilience. For example, there's one article mentioned that oyster larvae, they may be able to hear the reef soundscapes so that they can determine, okay, this is the suitable habitat or not. So the way they do the experiments that they have two tanks and then they put some oyster larvae here, and then one tank they will put play back the reef soundscape, and then another tank they will play the soundscape, not their preferred habitat, and then they found that the settlement rate is much higher if you play the reef soundscape there. Yeah, so that says that maybe this kind of marine larvae may have some mechanism to perceive the underwater sound or the underwater vibration, the particle motion, right? So that they can use this as some kind of remote cues to determine the suitability of habitats. Yeah. And also, this kind of experiment have been demonstrated not only in oyster larvae but also coral larvae or reef-associated fish. So lots of marine animals, they do use acoustic cues to find their habitats. Yeah, and also there's one article mentioned that if you design some kind of tube, then you put boat noise at this end, then the larvae will avoid the boat noise and then moving toward another direction. So that means this larvae not only use acoustic cue to find their habitat, they will also avoid noise. Yeah, because noise may interfere this kind of mechanism or indicate some kind of degraded habitat. Yeah. So in 2019, there's another very interesting article used that they deploy an underwater speaker in some kind of degraded coral reef, and then they play the healthy coral reef sounds, in that environment. And as a result, they found that lots of predator fish have been attracted in this region because those fish may think that, oh, there are lots of food here, right? But eventually they're still moving away because this is a degraded habitat. So they call this is some kind of new acoustic enrichment technique for coral reef. But I think that this is very interesting, but the problem is that if the habitat quality is not good, right, no matter what kind of sound you play, there's still enough resource to support biodiversity. But this also let us think about another direction. If the habitat quality is good, but there are lots of noise here, what will happen? Will larvae be able to understand that, oh, there's one good habitat here, right? So maybe larvae will avoid the noise so that the recruitment or the resilience will be affected. So this is something I think most of the marine ecologists haven't aware of this kind of impact, but this kind of impact may be very severe. Yeah. So last year, in 2019, we do publish one paper in Trends in Ecology and Evolution talking about, okay, we should care about the soundscape in deep sea. Because in deep sea, especially in hydrothermal vent, they usually distributed in very long distance, right? So how can deep sea larvae know, if this one habitat has been destroyed, how can they move to another habitat? Or if this habitat has been destroyed, how can they recover, right? So we argue that maybe underwater sound, especially the sound produced by hydrothermal vent, because usually they are low frequency, so they may be able to propagate for long distance, and the larvae may be able to catch this kind of cue and then settle down here. Yeah. So we are right now suggesting that when we are in the future, we are doing the deep sea mining, we should also care, not only just care about the biodiversity there, we also should consider soundscape as an environmental condition, and we should monitor that. Okay, so this is why right now ocean sound has been considered as an essential ocean variable, especially in the global ocean observing system. Yeah, because many people right now concerned how noise may affect ocean ambient and marine life. And also, for me, I'm interested how we can use soundscapes as a cue to predict biodiversity and ecosystem health. So what is soundscape? Soundscape is a collection of anthropogenic noise, sounds of marine animals and the environment. Yeah. So through sound production and propagation, then you will find this kind of habitat-specific soundscape, and then they are very from ecosystem to ecosystems. So if we can decompose the soundscape into different components, like environmental sounds, anthropogenic noise, and the animal vocalizations, then probably we will be able to do lots of applications, right? So for example, like ecosystem monitoring or marine spatial planning or conservation management. So this is why in 2018, I initiated this Ocean Biodiversity Listening Project, that we're trying to use lots of platforms and then deploy autonomous underwater recorders so that we will be able to efficiently collect large amount of underwater recordings And then we're trying to publish most of our underwater sounds on cloud-based platforms so that people can access this. I think many people right now know that Google Earth Engine just initiate the biggest version change recently, right? They are adding the time series, the time-lapse images on their map. Yeah. So consider that we are also doing the similar things, but we are using the acoustic data as a material. Yeah. And so we are also, because acoustic data is not easy, cannot be easily processed, because lots of source interference or lots of noise will interfere your data analysis. So we are also developing lots of machine learning tools to help ecologists to retrieve the useful information they want, and then help people to do applications. So this is currently our network. Because in these years, I'm mostly working in Asia, so our network is mostly focused on Japan, Taiwan, Hong Kong, and the Philippines. But we also have some collaborators from Turkey, Brazil, and some Japanese researchers also focus on the Arctic region. Yeah. And so this is how we collect the underwater sound. So for example, this is 40-meter mesophotic corals off Green Island. So we deploy this kind of underwater recorders in this kind of habitat. Because this kind of depth is usually not very easy to visit, right? Especially regular divers. So we record and then leave there for 2 or 3 months, and then we will replace them. So the data collection has been very easy, yeah. But the problem is how we analyze the data, yeah. Okay. So if you have a chance to see this kind of recorder, please don't remove it, yeah. Because the first time we deployed this kind of recorder at Chaojing, a marine park, and then after 2 days, the volunteer there told us that, hey, your recorder has been removed from the pile, and then leave it somewhere. So I asked them, please help me, to take it back. Because some divers, they think, oh, this is some garbage, or or maybe even consider that's a dangerous thing, right? So report the police. Yeah, but this is actually one very useful scientific equipment that we can monitor the underwater ecosystem health. Yeah. So if you deploy this kind of recorder in different habitats, then you will listen very different environmental cues. First, this is sounds of coral reef. Okay, so you can hear lots of a bubble-like noise in the background, right? That's the sound of salmon shrimp. Yeah. So you can imagine that this is a very productive or healthy reef, because there are so many salmon shrimp there. And then in the first few seconds, you will also hear some low-frequency pulses. That's the sound of dense sailfish. But if you move the recorder to other environment,外山顶洲, the sandy or muddy environment, or the estuary environment, this is the soundscape cue you will hear. Okay, again you hear the salmon shrimp. Okay, but the speaker here is not very good at low frequency. So it's a bit weird that you cannot hear the low frequency rumble. Yeah. But if you have a chance, please visit my website so that you will be able to hear this kind of sound clips by using your earphone. That is very amazing because you will hear the fish chorusing, the chorus made by croakers. It's just there are thousands or millions of croakers around this recorder, and some are very close to the recorder, and some are far from the recorders. So you will hear it's just like a frog chorusing. It's very amazing. Yeah. And then recently, many people are aware of the algal reef issue, right? So we also collect some underwater sounds from algal reefs. So this is the underwater sound of algal reef during high water. Okay, again, you can hear lots of salmon shrimp, right? So this demonstrates that this algal reef environment is not like a desert, right? It's actually very productive, but lots of underwater activity, only during the high water. Yeah. Okay, so if you have a chance to visit our website, then please listen to this audio clip, because the sound is very different from I play here. Yeah. Okay. So, but right now, the data collection is very easy, but the problem or the challenge is that how we can process this big amount of data. So right now, for example, in our lab, I have another system, but it is about like 200 terabytes. But I almost like occupy most of them. And every year I will produce another like more than 20 terabytes data. So right now, one of the difficulty in our lab is that how can I buy so many hard disks, and then how can I like manage, how can I do the long-term management of this database? Yeah. And not even to mention that there are many signals, in underwater environment that we are still not very familiar. For example, we don't know what kind of fish will produce what kind of signals. So it is still very difficult for us to use acoustic cue to identify species. It's not like for bird, right? They can listen to the audio and then say, oh, this is some species and this is another species, because they have their library. But for fish or even for crustaceans, marine mammals, we do have some, but for fish and crustaceans, we don't have a very good database. So species recognition is very difficult. Yeah, and also like in underwater environment, different sound sources will interfere at each other at the same time, right? So right now you may be able to hear the speaker noise, but also hear my vocalization, right? So sometimes this kind of interference will bias your result. Okay, so this is why I devoted a lot for this kind of analysis works. Yeah. So for Soundscape information retrieval, the thing we want to do is that at first we want to visualize the long duration recordings, and then we want to identify sounds of interest. Yeah, and then so that we can do applications. So we have developed an open toolbox called Soundscape Viewer that you can find it. You can find a MATLAB version or Python versions. But right now we are trying to move to Python version because you need to pay a lot for MATLAB license. Of course, right now it's getting cheaper and cheaper, but still, because in Python you can enjoy so many like state-of-the-art machine learning algorithms. So right now we are moving to the Python versions. Yeah. But in this Soundscape viewer, we have some features. For example, the first, you can visualize long duration recordings. And then even when you do not have a database, then you can use some unsupervised classification algorithm to help you like analyze the structure of your data set. And also we have a source separation algorithm so that you can reduce the interference from biotic and abiotic signals. Yeah. So I will briefly introduce what our package can do. At first, we can visualize long duration recording. For example, right now here you will see the visualization of 2 days recording. Yeah. If you want to listen this kind of 2 days recording, you will not, you have to spend more than probably like 1 month to listen like the entire data set, because for example, when I'm doing my master, and then I listen to marine mammal vocalization for about 10 minutes, and then I fall asleep because it's too boring, right? So I don't know where I listen, so I need to go back again. Yeah, so it's just like an endless loop. You just keep listening and listening, but without any production. Yeah, so this is why I decided to take like a Dr. Xie's class and then learn some MATLAB techniques. Yeah, but if you can visualize the long duration recording, then you will find lots of information. For example, in the nighttime, you will see this is y-axis is frequency and the x-axis is time. So in here, in the nighttime, you will see lots of high frequency and broadband signals. That's the sounds of salmon shrimps. Okay. Yeah, because of this kind of broadband structure, so only this kind of long-term spectrum, you will see they are also occurring in broadband and high frequency. But very interesting, you can see that lots of low frequency, like rumbles or chorusing, happen after sunset, like this one, and this one. This is the fish chorus. So it sounds really like a noise, but actually this is sound made by fish, and a large amount of fish. We can hear it again. Okay, because there are so many fish, so you are able to hear individual fish call. It's more like they are mixing, with each other. Yeah, but you can see this kind of low frequency signature on the high resolution spectrum, right? So this is why in this long-term spectrum you can see that it is here. So you can, based on this figure, you can directly tell, okay, there's one fish chorus here, and there's another fish chorus like probably here and here, right? And also interesting that in the daytime, you see lots of spikes extend from low frequency to high frequency. And there is like following some kind of like transient patterns. So this is the shipping noise, because lots of ferries or lots of tourist boats, they are passing by our recorders. So you will be able to pick up their events. So simply by looking at this, you can see, okay, how many vessels here, recorded here, or what is the acoustic activity, right? So let me show you some example like this one. So right now, if you use our toolbox, you can directly produce this kind of web page. And then you can see that this is the long-term spectrogram from coral reefs. So if you zoom in here, then you can see that, okay, this is one shipping event, right? So if you zoom in here, then you can see this is the classical shipping event, 1, 2, 3, 4, right? So you can easily count how many passing vessels from this visualization. And also you can see that, okay, this is the first fish chorus, and this is the second fish chorus. And they are showing some kind of interesting pattern that sometimes it is much stronger and sometimes it's weaker. I still don't know why the pattern is like that, but it may suggest some kind of behaviors, right? Yeah. And also you can see the presence of high frequency snap machines. Yeah. And also lots of unknown phenomena can be observed. For example, we don't know why in some acoustic recordings we can see this kind of high frequency peak. Maybe some diving activities or some, I don't know, some noise signals occur in the environment. But this gives us the cues that, if we really want to know the environmental, what's happening here, then maybe we first look at the acoustic data and then trying to investigate the environment there. Okay. So even though we do have this kind of visualization, but different sound sources still interfere with each other, right? So if we only just measure how loud of our acoustic recording, maybe, okay, right now you measure 130 dB from this 8 o'clock, but you don't know this is because of lots of fish chorus, right, are making noise, or the shipping noise are making a noise. So we need to try attempt to separate the biotic signal and the abiotic signals. So we developed one kind of unsupervised separation algorithm that you just need to provide long duration recordings. You don't need to provide any, and this machine will automatically learn the hidden periodical patterns from the data. Because our assumption is that most of the biological activities usually have a diurnal pattern, a seasonal pattern. So they have some kind of a natural a periodicity, right, occur in this kind of long duration recordings. Of course, here the shipping noise do have some diurnal pattern, right? Because this is coral reefs, so those are very tourist ferries, yeah. So they usually occur in the daytime. But if you look at the time series, you can find that the temporal pattern is still very different from this biological chorus. So the machine can learn from this kind of so specific periodical pattern, and then trying to separate this kind of mixture into two channels, right? So it's just like we are singing at the karaoke, right? But you want to remove the original singer voice, but you just want to listen to the background music, right? So we are doing the same thing, but we are working on the underwater soundscapes. So once we do that, we can effectively improve the performance of a clustering. So this is a demonstration show that if you use original data without source separation, then if you run clustering, then here the y-axis shows the 24 hours, and the axis shows the different recording days. And the different color represents different acoustic events, right? So here, because we don't do source separation, so the daytime is highly interfered by shipping activities. So here in the daytime, we see lots of orange events. This is mostly because of shipping activities. But if you do source separation at first, and then trying to do clustering, then you will find that, there are more some interesting patterns you can observe for the acoustic diversity. For example, in the daytime, you don't see so many shipping events, right? But after the sunset, you see the first crossing event, the second crossing event, and third crossing event. And this is corresponding to the first one, the second one, and the third one, right? So this kind of acoustic diversity is more like what we want to see, right? Especially for ecologists. We don't want to measure some kind of acoustic diversity because of the mixture of biotic and abiotic sounds, right? We want to separate the diversity of biological sounds and the anthropogenic noise. Yeah. So this is how we use the acoustic diversity to predict the biodiversity. Yeah. Okay, so right now I will introduce you some case studies. The first one is coral reef. So we collaborate with some Japanese colleagues, And then we deploy 3 sensors in off Okinawa. Yeah. So one is 1.5 meter, second is 20 meter, and then third one is 40 meter. So based on this long-term spectrum, you can see that the underwater soundscape is very different between the shallow water reef and the mesophotic reef. Mesophotic means like a light is not so intensive, right? But still a light dependent like coral reef ecosystem. Yeah. And you can see that in shallow water reefs, the soundscape is highly dominated by salmon shrimps because of the high frequency components. So it sounds like this. Okay, so this is shallow water reef. Okay, but in the mesophotic reef, you see that the high frequency component is not so evident, right? Instead, there are lots of low frequency components like this one. So this is the reef associated fish chorusing. Okay, so the signal may sound like pretty like a shipping noise, but actually this is not. This is sounds of large amount of crazy fish, and then they're making a noise. Yeah, so you can see that like after the sunset, there are no shipping noise here, right? But it's just purely fish chorus. Yeah, but in the daytime, because of this area, it's like the ferry routes from Kagoshima to Okinawa, and also from the Okinawa main island to some small islands. Yeah, so we will pick up lots of like shipping noise. Yeah, so if we apply our algorithms, then we can separate the noise and the biological chorus. Yeah. So here the y-axis shows the 24 hours, and the x-axis shows different recording days, about 1 year. So you can see that in shallow water reefs, the underwater noise is not so severe because, like in this region, the ferry usually don't go there. They usually go here, right? But in the deep water reefs, you can see that the entire daytime is heavily interfered by shipping noise. So even though like this deep water reef, they are not usually visited by divers, but still because of ferry routes, so they are still suffering from the underwater noise. Yeah. And also very interesting that if you look at the biological activities, you found that most of the chorusing only occur in the nighttime, not in the daytime. Yeah. But I don't know whether this is just the natural behavior of these animals, or because in the daytime there are so many like noise, right? So the marine animals, they may not. If they produce chorusing here, maybe that will not be so effective, right? So recently, because of COVID-19, like a lockdown, right? We do have a lockdown restriction even in Okinawa. So right now we are still collecting the underwater sounds during the lockdown period. So we want to analyze, okay, what will happen for underwater noise, before and during the lockdown period. Yeah. So we want to see if animals also adapt their behavior. So if you analyze the diversity here, you will see that in the shallow water, actually the diversity of fish chorusing is not so high. But in the mesophotic reef, especially in 20 meter and the 40 meter, you can see there are more colors, and different color represents different types of fish chorus, right? So you can see that especially during the summertime, the fish chorus is very complicated, like in mesophotic reefs. So that suggests in this kind of like a deeper water environment that is rarely investigated by divers. Actually, in the nighttime, we do observe like a high biodiversity there. Yeah. Okay. So this is how we can use underwater acoustics, the passive acoustics, to do a remote sensing of like the shallow water reef and the deep water reefs. Okay. So the second case study I want to introduce is the continental shelf environment. So I have been collaborating with some researchers from like Japan and also from Sinica, from information science department. So we are analyzing the long duration recordings from provided by Central Weather Bureau. Yeah. So Central Weather Bureau, they built this kind of underwater cable observatory from I think 2012. Yeah. And then after I think 2015 then the cable has been like interrupted. So it is no longer provided data. But during those 2 or 3 years, this is one of the very like a good scientific node that continuously provide underwater sound in this like a northeastern marine environment. Because this area is usually not easy to visit by our research vessel. It's a little bit far away, and we don't have so much budget, to do the surveys all the time, right? So if we can analyze the underwater recordings there, then we can, probably guess what's the pattern of the marine mammals or some underwater animals. Yeah. So this is the long-term spectrum of this macho system, and but the problem is that this macho system has lots of noise. In the background, you can see lots of this kind of like a nonlinear noise. This is produced by the systems. Yeah. So even though originally those scientists who designed this kind of like a system, they eventually give up to analyze this data set because there are so many noise. So I'm the only one who are still working on this data set. Yeah. But I'm more focusing on the biodiversity pattern, right? So from this acoustic data, you can see that these high frequency signals, they are the echolocation clicks produced from marine mammals, yeah, especially lots of dolphins. And also in the nighttime, in the low frequency part, you can see this kind of fish chorus, but it's somehow like a mask by low frequency noise. And also lots of like a shipping noise extend from low frequency to high frequency. Yeah, so this data set do provide us a very good like underwater information about the continental shelf environment. So we process the long-term spectrum, and then our model can effectively help us separate this data set into 4 components: cetacean vocalizations, fish chorus, shipping noise, and also the barring like electrical noise. Yeah. So I don't need to do any tracking algorithm. I just provide the data to our model, and then our model learn from the periodicity, and then it helps us separate these 4 components automatically. Yeah, so this is the amazing part for our algorithm, that you don't need to provide any manual annotations. It helps you to decompose the data based on the periodicity. Yeah. So if you measure the overall intensity of each component, then you will see that, okay, most of the cetaceans, they were recorded after the sunset and before the sunrise. This is because lots of foraging activities happening during the nighttime. Yeah. So this kind of echolocation clicks is very evident during nighttime. So this also shows that if you want to like do whale watching in Yilan, when you should go? You should go there in nighttime, right? Because no matter where you go, you will hit some dolphins. Yeah, but you will not be able to see them because it's in the nighttime. Yeah, but if you bring a hydrophone, then you can hear they are screaming, right? So that's something we haven't explored. Yeah, and also you can see there are different modes of like cetacean behaviors here. So this may suggest there are different species visit this region. So we also need to do more investigation. Yeah, and if we look at the fish chorusing, you will see that, okay, before this study, no one ever reported there are some sound-producing fish species in this region. But we do find that this area has like a very prominent fish chorus, from like March to like November, and it's only happened in the after the sunset and before the midnight. So after midnight, this fish chorus do not live. It's not there. So I'm not very sure what kind of animals they are producing this chorus, but this is some kind of very interesting acoustic phenomenon. And also we can see, okay, what's the shipping activities there, or some kind of scientific project there. For example, there are some events that lasting for the entire day. And after my check, I found that there are some research projects are trying to use this acoustic hydrophone as a receiving testing underwater communications. So also Navy talked to me that, okay, since you are doing this, we want to buy you a coffee and understand what you are doing. Maybe you detect something interesting, right? Yeah. But anyway, I didn't really focus on those low frequency range. But right now Navy is also interesting how we can use this technique to explore our environment, because like mainland China is also actively. Yeah. And also like my paper recently have been cited researchers because they use the cetacean dolphin whistles as one coding method to transmit the underwater message. Yeah. So this shows that if you can learn from the marine environment, you understand what's the pattern of the industrial application, right, or even like defense applications. So because right now we can separate different communities, right, more independently. Yeah. So we are trying to study their potential interactions. But unfortunately, because I don't have such fantastic techniques to study the interaction, so we can only use cross correlation to see maybe there are some potential correlations. So what we found is that between different components, we found that there's maybe higher potential correlation, like between dolphins and the fish. Yeah. So this may suggest the potential predator and the prey interaction. But we didn't really investigate the detail. So we don't know whether this is just a coincidence or this is a cause. Yeah. So, but we do provide this kind of data. Yeah. Okay. So this is how we think that right now, if you only have single channel recording in underwater, but you can still separate the single channel into independent components and then study their potential interactions. Yeah. Okay. The final example I would like to show you is what I have done in Japan. We're trying to analyze the low frequency data set from off Hokkaido. Yeah. So because in Japan State they used to deploy lots of hydrophones, but most of the hydrophones can only pick up very low frequency range. Like this one, the highest frequency range it can pick up is only 50 hertz. That's very, very low. They usually use this kind of frequency range to monitor underwater earthquakes, yeah, or some shipping events, but not very suitable for the biodiversity assessment. So I take a shot to try to see what I can learn from this data set. So I just run my algorithm and then separate that, and it shows that we can separate this data set into 3 components. But I don't really understand what are these 3 components. So I try to listen to all of them. So I found that the first one is related to the shipping noise, because here, a different event, they have different modes. That shows different engines or different size of the propellers. That's their noise signature. Yeah, and also we can pick up the sounds of underwater earthquake. Yeah, and then this is the vocalization of fin whales. Yeah. So even though we only have this limited low frequency band, but we can still see lots of things. And so I analyzed the data from 2007 to 2014. So this is the shipping data. It's quite surprising for me that I can detect so many shipping activities even in this high latitude region. But if we superimpose the AIS data set, you will find that this region is actually very busy, because this is the biggest port for Hokkaido. Yeah. And then we can also monitor the underwater earthquakes. So you can see that different events like this one, and this one, and this is not. This is because of a systematic noise. But you can effectively visualize the seismic activities, right? And then also see the seasonal and the annual pattern of the fin whales migration. Yeah. So this is just the preliminary result, but this shows that if we can construct a deep sea listening network, then perhaps we can use this kind of deep sea listening network to evaluate what's the connectivity in terms of acoustic, among different habitats. For example, from this hydrothermal vent and to this hydrothermal vent, whether they are acoustically connect to each other. This is something we don't know. Yeah. And then we can listen to the diversity of biological sounds as a proxy of the deep sea biodiversity there. Yeah. And then finally, we can listen to the mining events so that we can determine, what's the potential impact range of this anthropogenic activity. Yeah. And the most important one is that once we construct this kind of deep sea science network, then we can have the time series to look at their potential changes. Okay. So I hope that based on these 3 case studies, you can somehow get a sense about what is marine soundscape and what's the potential application. So for me, I keep always saying that, if we can separate biological sounds, then maybe we can use this as a proxy of biodiversity. But if we can separate noise and environmental sounds, maybe we can also use this information as an indicator of human interference and the quality of habitat. And then we can combine all this information to evaluate ecosystem health. Yeah. So considering that Taiwan is a very high biodiversity environment, right? We have so many different habitat types. Is it really possible that we can develop one single massive right, evaluate all kinds of ecosystems. I think it's very useful. For example, from what I have learned is that the traditional visual assessment method called reef is not workable for algal reef because of the high humidity and the wavy environment. So previously I learned from this paper, it shows that if you can somehow map in the density of marine mammals, and then you can use AI data to monitor swimming activities. So if you use this as some kind of, turn this as some kind of probability, and you multiply by these two components, then you will know that where is the stress happening, right? Because if the value is higher, then this suggests that the animals frequently visit there, and also anthropogenic activity also very busy there, right? But if you minus this opportunity, then you will give some kind of opportunities. For example, if you only have a limited resource, you want to prioritize your conservation management efforts, then maybe this is the area you want to choose at first, because for this area, there are more like animals, but less conflicts between the stakeholders. Right? So I'm thinking that if we can deploy lots of acoustic sensors around Taiwan, of course this is just my naive thinking, but if you can deploy acoustic recorder in all kinds of marine habitats, then we can monitor their noise level as an indicator of human interference. And then we can quantify the acoustic complexity as the proxy of biodiversity. Of course, this is not the most comprehensive biodiversity indicator, but it do provide some information, right? So if you multiply these two together, then you will know what's the stress, right? So this can help government to determine, okay, where should I develop, or where should I not develop? Yeah, and also it gives you the priority where you should allocate the conservation management efforts. Yeah. Okay. So the final part, I will talk about how we contribute from our research projects. So right now, once we publish our article, we will publish most of our data on our websites. And then, as I mentioned before, we also publish open tools. And then right now, we integrate them into data products and deposit, we archive them in deposit. Okay, so if you have a chance to visit our web portal, you will see that the published papers we have, that we all trying to publish all the underwater recordings as possible we can. For example, for monitor data set, because this is slightly sensitive data set, so we don't publish the original data, but we do publish the long-term samples. But for some area for reef or algal reef, we publish original recordings. So you are not just accessing our analysis result. You can access our original data and use your own algorithm to reproduce, what we have done. Yeah. So even though you may not be able to, you may not agree with my discussion or my statement, right? But you can use your own approach to analyze this data or do other applications. Yeah. And also, our toolbox is open source, so you can download it freely available from GitHub, or you can use Google Colab as an interactive interface to directly interact with our data and the toolbox. Yeah. And then in the future, we are also trying to do some development. For example, we are developing more advanced techniques of soundscape information retrieval. And right now, we are trying to build ocean sound bank so that more people can know, okay, if I hear these signals, what may be the species, right? What kind of fish or what kind of crustaceans. Yeah, but this will take a very long way to go. Yeah. And also right now, one recorder, it costs about 15万 or 20万, yeah, 200,000, yeah. So it is still quite high, right? So right now we can only affordable for several recorders. But if you look at some European or US projects, they are deploying 100 recorders in one project, right? That's really amazing. So they do have that kind of big scale projects in North Sea or in US marine protected areas. But for Taiwan, probably we cannot do this because we have limited resources. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to collaborate with some makers so they know how to use low-cost platforms to construct this kind of recording systems. And then maybe we can, just the story of Airbox, right? Maybe we can also making this kind of low-cost platform and then distributed this system to citizen scientists. Yeah. Okay, so finally that we know that right now in Taiwan we have lots of environmental issues. So in our lab, what we are devoted to is that we're trying to develop this kind of remote sensing observation techniques. And then we're trying to publish open data. And then because all the codes can be integrated into tools, so you don't need me, you just need my codes, right? So you can reproduce what I have done. Yeah. So we hope that this kind of reusable tools can, and also the open data can reduce the, so many conflicts happen in the environmental impact assessment. People can look at the data and then discuss, okay, what are the impacts and what are the benefits? Yeah. Okay, so this is a take-home message. So ocean sound is a key parameter for understanding our impacts on marine biodiversity. And right now, we are initiating this kind of Ocean Biodiversity Listening Project. Yeah, and we are trying to publish open data and open tools. And then we develop the Soundscape information retrieval technique so that you can easily analyze the data without lots of efforts. And then I hope that you can understand right now, even though you just have single channel recording, but you can effectively transform it into multiple ecological dimensions, namely like biological, geophysical, or anthropogenic activities. Yeah. So I hope that this will provide us more opportunities based on this kind of marine ecoacoustics. Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Fishing boats often go out at night so they won't be seen, and it's really unregulated out there. So is yes, you mentioned that it's good for marine protected area monitoring, but is for that specific situation, is it feasible with and do you have an estimate of when it might even be implemented, or if people are currently looking into it for that specific fishing situation where illegal fishing or getting dolphins? And will it be an effective tool in actually doing international monitoring for that kind of activity?
Okay, so I guess the question is more how we can really turn this kind of technique into effective tools for marine conservation, fishery management, or illegal fishing, something like that. Yeah, this is a very good question. So right now, the reason why we are trying to share the open data and the tool is because we understand that the difficulty is not just why we report it. It's more how you analyze the data. Yeah. So I believe that right now there are global efforts trying to use acoustic data as the tools for conservation. So I'm also a member of the International Ocean Experiment, so we are doing this. But I think right now one of the difficulties is that ecological researchers, they don't really understand how to use acoustics as the tool. For example, I have been write emails to Soundscape for a long time. How can I use this toolbox to analyze my data set? But I have probably, to be honest, that the other people, if they are not looking at acoustics, they face so large amount of acoustic data, but they don't know how to start this. Right? So I think I don't have a good answer for that, but I think the quickest way is to develop a community of ecoacoustics so that more people can understand how I can use the acoustic, to answer some ecological questions, and then you can turn this as a powerful weapon, to facilitate the marine conservation.
Is there any simple reason why the shipping line is so rough-ended? Is there a simple reason?
Yeah, it's because of the limitations of propellers. So when the shipping is very close to our report, usually when we are listening to a shipping from long distance, you can only pick up low frequency components. But that's because of the engine or gear, something like that. But if you are there very close, then those captation noise will be very, very broken because of, so this is what I learned from the small shipping vessels. If they are, passing by our recorder in very high speed, you can even see that the noise can reach to ultrasonic range. This is because of captation noise. But I don't know why, for this kind of cargo ship, they can even at some point extend to very high frequency range. So this is something I feel that in previously we only focus on low frequency range, especially for shipping noise. Right now it do show that this kind of shipping noise can extend to very high frequency and even master the
I
communication.
think it's probably not true. It's probably the ghost from the uncertainty principle. It's because you have this really concentrated signal a long time, so you lost the resolution in the frequency. So it's an aliasing effect. Any really concentrated signal, if you do the time frequency analysis, it would spread out a little bit of the frequency. So that's sort of my concern because you're talking about this particular pattern, but some of them are probably not really dead. It's just, a way you display the signal using spectrum. And today we know the time location, frequency location is still a fundamental physical problem. It's not resolved.
Yeah.
So when you talk about the pattern, I think it's that part has to be.
Yeah, I agree that like a signal processing do, like sometimes especially for acoustic, it can somehow manipulate the data because like the FFT resolution, like if you change it, then visually it will change it out. But let's look at the data. It's just like even under the FFT setting, you can see that it is high resolution spectrum. This is normal spectrum I displayed, not just the long-term spectrum I used. So you can see that even for this like shipping signal, I can play it to you. You can see that it can extend to very high frequency range. And then upon some certain scans, then the high frequency component disappears. Yeah. So I have been looking for this kind of radiated noise pattern. I don't have a good answer for that because I'm not the person who working on this kind of physics issues. But I do know that this is a quite common phenomena for this kind of vessel signals. Yeah. But even though in physics, maybe we still need to discuss about what's the mechanism to produce this high frequency component. But from my point that we can see this kind of pattern on time series, right? And it do show that, okay, this kind of pattern exists there. So for the ecological, as ecological researchers, we are interested to know whether this high frequency component may interfere the communication signal produced by dolphins or fish. Yeah, because it's pretty broadband, as we observe. Probably because that will affect the sound propagation, by temperature and salinity. Yeah, that will all affect sound propagation. Yeah. So this you can ask Dr. Wang. She's more specialized in this field compared to me. Yeah, but as I understand that temperature and salinity will all affect the sound propagation. So eventually, even if you place a recorder here, that the detection range may vary from time to time or season to season. So this is image that this recorder is just like one animal in the deep sea, right? But here we are just trying to present the time series based on this spectrum to you, and then we're trying to see how what's the potential changes of the environment. And so we are based on pattern to this trying to see what's the ecological patterns. Yeah. But I agree that the sound propagation will definitely affect the pattern CT. So the best solution is that if you can deploy so many recorders, right, so that you will eventually solve this issue. But probably this is not the case right now. So right now there are many people that argue that maybe you need to understand the sound propagation at first, so that you can determine what's the location to deploy your recorders. But from my point is that the sound propagation always changes from time to time. No matter where you place, it's impossible to solve all the problems. Yeah. So from my point of view is that if we can continue to accumulate data and then share with everyone, right, and then people can work on the same data set and then solve different issues.
question related to this.
Yes. I'm just curious because let's say like different marine organisms, is there a chance that sounds of various marine organisms may overlap with each other?
Yeah.
And like the of course the sound of a whale is very distinct from the ones of a dolphin. So, or is there even a chance that let's say organisms don't even produce sound at all? So how are we able to overcome that kind of challenge?
This is a very good question because as we know, I'm staying here, but I'm not always producing sound. Right? So acoustic is just one indicator about their behavior, not always relate to their presence or absence. Right? But from this kind of marine ecological perspective, I think this still shows that what's the behavioral pattern of this group of animals. Right? If they occur in this diurnally or seasonally, that must definitely relate to their behavioral patterns. So this is what I think that acoustic is not always the truth, right? But it do show some pattern, and then it is a very effective tool to complement traditional visual assessments. Yeah. And also your first question mentioned that maybe some animals they do use the same frequency band, or how can we account for this kind of recognition issue, right? So this is one of the cases we are working on right now. I have undergraduate students, she's working on the fish sounds, right? So most of the fish sounds in coral reef, they are all detected in the frequency range below 2 kHz. Yeah. So they basically use the same frequency range. But how do different species, because acoustic is some kind of environmental resource, right? So even some people right now, they are discussing the possibility of acoustic niches, right? Just like different birds, they may use different timing to communicate. Yeah, so acoustic is also a competitive resource you have to, think about. Yeah, but for fish, it's very interesting because different species, they use different interpose intervals. For example, some fish do, but some fish do like this, and some fish produce do like this. So they use different patterns, right, to recognize each other. Yeah. So my undergraduate students, they develop this kind of machine learning model, and then trying to recognize not only just to separate fish calls, but also they can recognize this different interpose interval. For example, like this one, it consists by 3 pulses, and it shows one short interpose interval and a long pulse interval. But for this one, it only consists of 2 pulses and just 1 pulse interval, right? And even these 2 types are all based on the 2 pulses, but the interval is different. Yeah. So you can see that even for this one, they do show some kind of divergence after a sunset or before a sunrise. So they use different time periods, as their behavior. So I think this reveals that the acoustic diversity covers a wide range of ecological domains, from community, species, population, individual, or even behavior. But right now the problem is that all these factors are affecting the acoustic data, right? But because of the limited research we have, so we are unable to answer all these variations. But if we can continue to do this, combine visual and the acoustic assessment, I think in some way we can better understand the environment.
Thank you very much.
More question over there? Yeah, interesting idea about sound diversity. Can you elaborate what you mean by sound diversity? Because that includes anthropogenic and the noise and the biological. How do you quantify the sound diversity?
Yeah. So right now what we are doing is that we are trying to design some acoustic feature. For example, the acoustic feature may be related to frequency domain. For example, I may produce this kind of low frequency signal, but another people may produce higher frequency signal. So we consider that if acoustic event with different spectral features, like different frequencies, big frequencies, they may belong to a different species or different behaviors. Yeah. So this is our assumption. We assume that the diversity of signals is directly related to the species or behavior. But this is just our assumption. This is not always true. Depends on environment and the context. Yeah. And also, for this case, frequency is not working here, right? Because they are all using the same frequency. So we need to look at their temporal patterns. Yeah, so we can also consider that in our diversity assessment. Yeah, and then we use clustering algorithm, to analyze their diversity. Yeah.
I got a question. Maybe you explained that before. You mentioned that one of the problems of using ENA is you don't know where that ENA comes from. Yeah. How about sound? Yeah. Sound can transmit from like everywhere and different frequency or different amplitude. It can transmit different distance. Then how do you?
Yeah, very good point. Yeah, I should change this statement later. Yeah, some can also propagate from long distance. Yeah, so to be honest, if I only have
single channel, I was unable, to say, okay, whether this sound comes from long distance or short distance. But usually, if you set up a threshold, right, to only look at high intensity signals, usually it only comes from like the nearby environment. Yeah, but it still depends on the source. For example, like whales may produce very high intensity signals, so the propagation range may be up to tens kilometers, or several kilometers, at least several kilometers. But for like the dolphins, they produce these high intensity echolocation signals. But because of their like directionality, it's just like a flashlight, right? So it has high directionality. So if the hydrophone is directly oriented to the like the beam pattern, then the hydrophone is like at this direction, then the diffusion range will drop to only several 10 meters. So this really depends on the signal type and also the behavioral context. Yeah, but this problem can be accounted for by if you apply a hydrophone array. Yeah. For example, if you have 3 or 4 hydrophone elements in this area and then synchronize it, then you can use time difference to localize the sound source, and even you can track the movement